Don't forget to leave a like if you're stopping by, and if you're new to Geekdom 101, remember to subscribe and enable all notifications so that way you don't miss a single video. We discuss all things Dragon Ball here, movies, anime, manga, and even some video games. We've been here for 10 years and many more to come. I thank you for your continued support. Let's get to the video. Welcome to my breakdown of Dragon Ball Daima episode 13 as the story continues after the historic 12th episode when Vegeta became Super Saiyan 3 to defeat Tamagami 2. Now things slow down far more than I really wanted them to. However, there were a few lore bits and a few things you may have missed in this episode, and we're going to go over all of that today, including some very interesting tie-ins to Dragon Quest, GT, and some of Toriyama's other works and inspirations. The most important aspect of this episode plot-wise was the fact that Gomah, being afraid that Goku and the gang are going to the first demon world to collect that last Dragon Ball and to save Dende, orders Degasu to disable Warp. Degasu says that he's never heard of somebody disabling Warp-sama, yet he knows exactly how to do it. He goes into this mysterious chamber somewhere in the castle and pulls this lever and literally puts Warp to sleep. So this lever is somehow connected to Warp's mechanism and literally puts the big fish to sleep. The plan here is to prevent Goku and the gang from getting to Demon World 1. But let's not forget that Warp is not the only way to get between the demon realms as well as, of course, the multiverse as a whole. The other method to get between the three different demon worlds is the mysterious portals within each of the demon realms covered by a sacred shield. Now, this was first shown to us all the way back in Dragon Ball Daima episode 3, and in that episode, Shin explains to Goku that this is how you used to be able to get in between the demon realm before they were sealed away. So it's pretty clear that this is what they're going to do. In fact, if you look at the next episode preview for Daima episode 14, you literally can spot it right there behind Pansy. So they're going through that portal, or at least towards that portal, in the next episode, thankfully. Due to more technical difficulties, they end up landing the ship in a mysterious planet in Demon World 2, leading to Pansy and Bulma working together to try to fix the ship while the others look around. Bulma introduces Pansy to the Hoi Poi capsules. That's what they were originally called when they were first introduced all the way back at the beginning of the Dragon Ball manga. Now, she also mentions that her father invented them. And actually, this is not only true, but it explains as to why that family has so much wealth. Bulma's family is the wealthiest family in the world just because her father invented the Hoi Poi capsules. But think about it. If such a thing really existed in the real world, anybody who invents it would also end up being super rich. So that makes sense to me. Elsewhere, Neba starts to freak out because he realizes that they are on the planet of Mega, which is a planet in Demon World 2 that has literally giants, which are only known as Mega or Megasu in the Japanese version. So there are giants called Megath, and it's apparently the second most dangerous place in Demon World 2. I wonder what the first is. Apparently everything is gigantic there, and it's so dangerous that even the Demon King and the military police never even go there. Glorio takes a moment to make a quick phone call to Dr. Arinsu, letting her know they have the second Dragon Ball, and he's going to bring both of them to her. This little bonding scene with Bulma and Pansy is pretty cool, considering that they are both tech whizzes and they can both learn from each other. This idea of having a tech whiz on the team isn't just something that started with original Dragon Ball and Bulma being on Goku's team, but also even into GT. We have Trunks going into space with Goku when he inherited some of that tech wizardry from his mother. One of the big things we finally find out in this episode that Bulma discussed in previous episodes is the power source behind the planes of the Demon Realm. Remember, she was unable to repair the Demon Realm ship that Shin and Kibito used to get to the universe because she did not know what the power source was. But this Magilite seems to be a magically infused, I guess, compound that can power their vehicles. According to Pansy, this compound can react with acidic water to produce energy that can last for 30 years. Pansy goes on to explain something interesting about why there's no sun in the Demon Realm, but there's always sunlight. And that's because the compounds from Demon World 2 and Demon World 3 come together to form Magilite, which is where this energy source comes from. So it's almost like beefed up solar power. The crew has to contend with an actual stampede of giant hamsters. That's something I would have never expected to see from Dragon Ball. But there is a history of Goku and the others battling giant creatures like big pterodactyls. And don't forget about the worms in the Dragon Ball Z anime filler inside of Majin Buu. Very shortly after, we are introduced to our very first member of the Megath race. And guess what? It's just a child. There are bigger ones, fully grown adult ones that are even larger. And apparently this child Megath is on his way home from school, which is why he has such gigantic books and of course a giant ruler. This is more of that sort of Toriyama world building where he takes very real things that we do in the real world and apply it to fiction. Obviously having a giant reading a giant book and having a giant ruler and going to giant school is preposterous, but it works inside of his fictional world, and this is far from the first time that we've seen Toriyama do this. In fact, the Megath is inspired by a couple different things. First of all, if you go all the way back to Dragon Quest II, Toriyama has a couple of character designs that very much resemble this. And one of them is part of a trio of guardians that are nearly at the end of the game called Atlas. This giant Gigantus is colored orange just like this giant. But let's not forget, we saw something very much like this in Dragon Ball GT. I feel like a lot of people are going to pick up on this, and it's the first thing I thought of too, but clearly this is far from the first giant Toriyama's ever come up with. To be more specific, it's a reference to Dragon Ball GT Episode 6, where Goku, Trunks, and Pan go to planet Momath and they visit these giants that live on that planet. Momath is, of course, a pun on the word mammoth. For a long time, people said that Akira Toriyama had nothing to do with GT, and that's wrong. Many years ago, I produced a video called The Truth About Dragon Ball GT, where we talk about this. I bring this up because the whole idea behind the mammoth people is an idea that was pitched to Toei Animation based on a piece of art that Toriyama submitted for Dragon Ball GT. Make sure you check out that Truth About GT video because it will dispel a lot of myths that people have said for decades about Toriyama and GT. But yes, the GT 2.0 jokes really apply for this episode. So remember the Kraken, those dangerous sea creatures? Yeah, this guy eats them, so that should tell you something. The crew ends up having to run away from, well, the Megath's pet. That's right, this dog-like creature is the primary antagonist of this episode. If I'm being honest though, I don't find it that interesting. In fact, I think that episode 13 is the weakest episode of Daima so far. That being said, Vegeta uppercutting the dog in his jaw was freaking hilarious. And Goku once again messes up Glorio's name by calling him Goloro. Man, this guy... Is there a pattern here?
なあゴリロ
グロリオだ。
グリロにはちょっと無理だろ
グロリオだ。
ゴリロ
違う、グロリオだ。
だ
Both Piccolo and Vegeta try firing energy blasts on the pet, and the dog, or whatever it is, just laughs. Obviously, they're far from using their true powers, so the three of them come together to try to confuse the animal. This is cool at the very least because we're seeing Goku, Vegeta, and Piccolo as a trio work together, and that's pretty rare to see, especially nowadays. Goku actually ends up on the dog and runs into these giant-sized fleas. Now I'm wondering if this is Dragon Ball or Honey, I Shrunk the Kids. If you've seen the movie, you'll know. If not, get it how you live. Everyone works together to deal with not just the ticks, but also the animal itself, while Goku fires his first Kamehameha since, what, episode 8? I think so. But all that ends up happening is now the giant is alert to their presence. The ship repairs are finished, and so Piccolo and Vegeta try to distract the giant and anything else that might come in the way to give them a clean escape. The giant was about to smack the ship right out of thin air and maybe even destroy it until Goku shows up using all his might to push back the hand. Vegeta, now in Super Saiyan, and Piccolo attempt to blast it. Meanwhile, Goku is trapped inside of his clothing. Goku ends up falling into his book bag where he becomes a Super Saiyan and clashes with the giant, power pole against giant ruler. This scene I actually enjoyed a lot more the second time I watched the episode. It's beautifully animated, very smooth, and pretty funny. So I did like it more the second time, even though I still had my criticisms about how much time this episode wasted. I feel like this story could have been resolved in a much shorter time, like maybe half an episode, instead of this being the main plot of this episode. Glorio quickly kicks into action and saves Goku before he gets stepped on. So remember earlier when they were talking about how this is the second most dangerous planet in the Demon Realm? Vegeta asks, what about the first? And Neba says, well, yeah, there is another one. The planet of Giga, where the Gigaths are from. Now, where did Toriyama get the idea for Gigas? It's actually from Greek mythology. The Gigans were a race of giants that fought in a war against the Olympian gods. And because of this, you see the word Gigas or Gigan or Gigan used a lot in fiction, not only in the Far East, but also in the West. Now, we actually do spot near the end of the episode a couple of what appear to be full-sized adult Megaths, and man, don't these things look familiar? Is it just me, or do they not remind you of the barbarians from Dragon Ball Super? Remember that episode where Zamasu and Gowasu used the time rings to go meet up with the barbarians and they start fighting each other? Very similar designs here. The episode ends with a beautiful shot that reminds me of Christmas, which just passed a few weeks ago. Not my favorite episode. In my opinion, the worst one of Dragon Ball Daima. I think it dragged its feet for too long. I think that the story should have been cut down significantly that we got in this episode, and more of the main plot should have been pushed. There are only 7 or so episodes left in Dragon Ball Daima, and we are near the final battle, so the pace needs to pick up. But I do think that with next week's episode and the fact that we see the portal At the end of the episode, that tells me that either in the middle or at the end, they're finally going to make it to Demon World 1 and all the pieces of the puzzle will come together. We'll find out next week. In the meantime, check out the videos right there on your screen, including a recent update about Dragon Ball Super's manga return, a video about Cell versus Dabura, which one is stronger, and more Daima related content. Take care of yourself. See you soon.